So thanks everyone for coming to the Careers in Animation Design and Production panel as an extension of Arts Week and the SMFA Creative Careers class. So today we have Ty Enos from Hornet Animation and an alum of Tufts, as well as Brian Pope, senior recruiter at Creative Circle. So I'm going to start by letting them introduce themselves, and then we will dive into your questions at the end. If you want to pop your questions into chat, like I mentioned, we would be recording. You can please silence your audio and your video if you prefer. And then for Q&A at the end, if you want to open both when you speak, of course, we can move forward from there. So let's start first with Ty Enos. If you want to just give a quick overview, kind of what you've been doing since you graduated, and then we'll move on to Brian.
Got it. Hey everybody, my name is Ty. I graduated from the Tufts dual degree in 2019. And since I graduated, I started an internship right out of school, and I've been there ever since. They hired me full-time after 5 months of being there, and I'm promoted, and now I'm a 2D animator. I help choose interns that come in. I work with the interns while they're here. And we do give a brief, quick summary of the studio. We have 20 different directors. We do 3D, 2D animation, stop motion, motion design with text. We're about 50 full-time staff people, but we work with dozens of freelancers at any given time. And we make mostly advertisements. So commercials you see on TV, things you see on the internet, YouTube commercials, you name it, mostly ads. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Brian.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. So yeah, my name is Brian Pope. I'm a recruiter with Creative Circle. I've been doing this for a little over 10 years now. So we're a staffing agency. We focus specifically on marketing and advertising, design, creative, and generally digital needs. But prior to doing this, and I'll walk through what that looks like a little bit, I was a graphic designer, directive designer, and art director since 97, really, so about 13 years. I started in web design. I went back to school, really liked advertising and conceptual thinking, and worked at a small agency, large agency, in-house, and then got to do design for Karma Loop. We would establish these brands for, like, I got to do tour merch for Ghostface Killah and for Kid Cudi, and it was a pretty cool ride. After that, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I didn't want to code anything anymore, I think, and an opportunity with Creative Circle presented itself. So since then, I've really been working primarily with creative, but also with marketers and others kind of in the communications field to find full-time roles, freelance roles, either moonlighting or contract, primarily in the Boston area. We've got locations all over the country, but I do focus in this region specifically.
Great. So Ty, let's start for this question with you. When you talk about, being a recent grad, thinking about, this is a two-part question. So talk about things you kind of would like to share with students who are considering animation, and kind of some things you learned right away that maybe as you were pursuing a career in animation weren't, on the table, or you would love to learn more about that aspect of the sector or area, maybe some new resources you found out about, and then what kind of piece of advice would you give students around getting connected to those kind of those steps that could help prepare you for a career in animation?
Yes. Okay. So advice, or like the general landscape of someone, like to describe it as someone who wants to get into it, I'd say there's more animation than you think. And it's not just, animation studios that make TV shows, cartoons that you like, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, things like that. There's studios in Boston that make things for the Children's Museum. There's things in New York that make ads. And a lot of companies need an in-house person to make these things. And with the internet these days, so many people are being able to do something on their own and make, whether it's Patreon or all these different crowdsourcing stuff. There's a lot of different ways to be an animator, in addition to all these different applications that there are for animation, features, TV ads, everything there. So when going into it, I think my first advice would be, when you're trying to set your sights on a specific thing, you might not get to do that specific thing right away, but you'll learn along the way. You'll get skills that will grow and grow that might be applicable to more than what you're hoping to hone in on. For example, I did an internship where we made a phone app, like a phone game, and I got to practice. I wasn't, working on, a short film or anything that would like really push my, narrative animation skills, but I was still making art, and it was a portfolio piece that I could show in pieces as something that I would use that helped me get the next thing later. So yeah, I think, especially when I was at SMFA, I think I let myself get too honed in on, I thought I had a very clear idea of things I wanted to do. And I focused, very specifically on that, but I found myself here in New York. I wasn't expecting to be here, and it was, it's a different type of animation that I knew existed, and I wish I'd researched a little more of just like what's out there and what's, all the different types of animation that you can find yourself in. Was something I was very, or stop motion animation is more prevalent than you might think, even though you haven't seen a stop motion movie in a while. Things like that are still around, and with the internet, things are more able to make things remotely than ever. So yeah, I think I might be missing part of that question. I don't remember. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. I think the point about, when you're preparing for a career, I think you summed it up really nicely. You can get really fixated or finite on a specific niche area. I want to do this kind of animation and this kind of animation only. And if you don't stay open, even when you land an internship or professional entry-level opportunity that you really enjoy, you should always stay open to, other opportunities, projects to build your network and expand sort of your practice in that, maybe stop animation is an area you were really interested in, and having exposure to other areas will help you kind of come back to what you love and enhance your skill set in that area. So just always keeping that dialogue open. So I think that was good. You talked about the opportunity to just explore and do more research, talk to more people, see what other companies and organizations are out there. So yeah, I think you teed that up nicely, better than I phrased it. So good job. Brian, kind of moving forward from that, perhaps you can talk a little bit about some different roles in animation, design, production, like doing a little bit deeper dive of what types of companies Creative Circle works with, what roles that might come up, and we'll start there.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on Ty a little bit here, and this general idea, I know it can be so daunting. I remember being in school and, just the sort of vacuum of information, or sort of what will become of me? What am I going to do? And all this training and sort of this kind of more pure science versus applied science, right? Sort of you're honing your craft, and you're also finding out the things that you resonate with. So this discussion today is going to focus a lot on the applied science of how do you take that and plug it in to the usual suspects, right? Ty's a great example, working at an agency doing really beautiful commercial spots and partnering these business needs and communication needs with his craft. But I always want to throw out there at some point in these conversations that it goes both ways to some degree, and not to lose the thing that got you where you find yourself right now as best you can, right? To say, hey, this is what I'm really passionate about, and trying to continue to pursue that, even if it's not professionally right away, making sure that you're still honoring that, because that is really where the new voices come from each generation. You know, I can't help but think of like David Byrne, who went to like RISD and then he founded Talking Heads. I think he went for graphic design. Talking Heads is awesome. It's not really graphic design, though he did it off an action figure made of himself, which is pretty awesome. So, you know, anyway, so we'll look at more at the applied section, I guess. And so the types of roles that I tend to see, and with the caveat, it tends to be in the Boston market, there's no shortage when it comes to motion and animation of companies, especially in Boston, that are a little bit more niche. These companies can be targeting other businesses and may have software solutions that are difficult to describe even to their own family members. You know, kind of like, what do you do? What does this thing do? And so there's a lot of room, I think, for folks who can help to tell that story well. Right. And that isn't just doing the tactical After Effects work or what have you. It's also partnering with business leaders who sometimes get in the weeds of their own story and helping them to kind of crystallize the way to craft that narrative via script writing, storyboarding, and then the creation of something that could be an explainer video that maybe lives on their website or they pump out as a sales tool. So, you know, this sort of linear narrative has become more and more popular, I think, as a mechanism outside of the more standard channels we're used to, like broadcast advertising or video more generally. So that's one piece of what we tend to see from the creative discipline. I will say that I think that if you're looking at landing a full-time role in motion or animation, and maybe Ty, you can speak to this, I think there is a preponderance of opportunities 3.5 hours away in New York. There are certainly production houses, there are certainly animation houses, and there's certainly design studios that do this to some great degree. There are also larger companies that do enough of it. I can't help but think of like a Parametric Technology Corporation that does a lot of augmented reality and virtual reality as a tech solution. They do so many motion pieces. They may bring someone in-house in their company that just does that. But that's the exception. In Boston, I find oftentimes this discipline is sort of farmed out case by case. Hey, we have this need. And often we'll get a call from a client saying, we need a 2-minute explainer video. We need something like that. Who can you show us? And then they'll end up booking someone. So I find that for that discipline, freelance there's never been a shortage of that type of work. I don't want to speak unequivocally, but I think in relation, New York has more opportunities for those who may be working agency side for those types of motion roles. Now, then of course there's graphic design, right? And there's also illustration. Are these the predominant disciplines in this conversation today, Ryan?
Say that one more time.
So I've just covered off on motion, but I just want to make sure. So we also have designers here today and illustrators. Is that pretty much?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And those that are interested. So again, to remind you, the SMFA curriculum is very interdisciplinary. So that students will be working across areas, which is awesome because they have, I think, sometimes more skill sets than they realize, you know.
My initial point where I'm trying to put people in boxes.
No, not at all. But yeah, it's, I think, you know, thinking broadly about within animation and then product design to, you know, definitely all the areas that your agency covers. And I definitely have witnessed with our students a big interest in marketing and advertising agencies too. And so working within agencies that may have a broader pull where animation or illustrators needs would be, you know, needed also.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I sometimes say that for such a creative industry, nobody has much imagination when it comes to hiring people. And I think that's a consequence of there being a lot of diversity of talent out there. And so when you are, and we'll probably get to this, but when you're looking at roles, you know, kind of being able to do an audit of all the things that you offer and then trying to, like a game of Uno, pulling the cards that are being asked for and trying your best to highlight those tends to be the name of the game. Design is great because every company needs design. And any company worth its salt is willing to pay for great design. You'll have the long tail of small to medium businesses that, you know they need design, but you know, they may also need you to wear other hats. So I found that as long as graphic design was something I wanted to do, there were certainly a number of opportunities out there to do it in a full-time capacity for a company or a marketing or advertising agency, right? So that's predominantly what we tend to see in the creative discipline at Creative Circle, because there's just so much of it. As far as illustration is concerned, oftentimes I'll see illustrators kind of couple that capability set, either that or specialize. So perhaps illustrators are specializing in the publishing industry, or I'm working with a company right now that is trying to roll out a lot of sort of data visualization elements, but it's for medical information. So it's sort of an interesting hybrid of medical illustrator slash infographic, almost weird bedfellows, but nevertheless trying to speak to audiences that maybe are English as a second language, but trying to describe. So there are going to be a lot of kind of cross-pollination. But again, in Boston, in my line of work, I tend to see illustrators more as gigging. I tend to see designers more as consistently full-time. Motion animation, sort of, it'll vary. Again, that's a really broad statement, but I think it tends to be true.
So let's think about what are some things that you're seeing, maybe some lessons you're seeing from students as far as presenting themselves. We'll start with Brian on this, and then Ty, if you want to jump in, just from kind of, I would say, as you were interviewing for positions and then in the role. So I'll reiterate that after Brian speaks, but maybe some examples of what to do and what not to do to impress recruiters and to kind of stand out.
Sure. Well, the further you get in the process of landing a job, really the easier it gets. It's almost like a decrescendo, right? At first, you're really trying to fight the noise of many other applicants, and you're doing it digitally. You don't even have a voice in the conversation, really, other than what you're putting out there via your resume, your portfolio site. So that's why I think the portfolio site is probably the most integral component, because that's where your odds are slimmest. I think it's very helpful in your portfolio site to feature the things that you're most passionate about and try to leaven that with things that you find to be most saleable. And as you're looking for jobs, you're going to start to do a little bit of research. Basically, what am I seeing a lot of, right? And does that interest me? And do I have it in some amount, right? And trying to marry those things between, again, your pure science and this applied science, I think is a great practice. There are many other things that you can look to do in terms of making sure that you're covering off on the types of expectations that a job may have. So when you start, you can think in terms of, types of work or aesthetic, but then you can also think in terms of types of deliverable, right? And before this conversation started officially, Ty and I were talking about the different types of disciplines that his agency covers off on, right? And I was like, oh, you do like, traditional 2D, drawing and animation. And he's like, well, yeah, that's kind of my jam, but our agency does like 3D and vector, motion typography, and what I mean. So a lot of different flavors in there. So I think I try to encourage people to blow out their campaigns if they're looking at design work. So if you did do a branding solution, great. You show that style guide, but then show how you apply it. And even if that wasn't part of your curriculum, in the wee hours, go ahead and say, okay, well, what if I did have to then take this and create a digital ad unit, which would be, or a social media tile, that's kind of lighter lifting. Or what about a trifold brochure, or an email mock-up leading to a landing page? That could be a little bit trickier, but showing those as a blown out campaign, thinking in terms of the communication channels that businesses need, is really very important, right? And it doesn't really matter too much if it's part of your assignment or if you're doing it on your own, if you're doing it professionally. We are working a subjective pursuit. And, so you have full leave to show what you can do, even if you decided just to do it to show that you can do it.
One thing you said, I'll going back a tiny bit, Brian, you said like taking almost like a lay of the land. What do you see out there and what kind of things are popular, especially with ads and animation? That was something I went out of my way to research and like, what's going to make me stand out? And yeah, to answer the question of how do you present yourself, at least what I've seen as I'm looking over, internship application reels for our animation internship, the things that stand out the most are, things that make you unique, or things that, we can tell that aren't just, an assignment and something that you took, you really took the time to see where make sure it's completely finished, and that this could almost exist as a product or exist as a, a part of in my company's case, a commercial or something, but still having, an essence of not having it be the, taking those might be boring commercials, but breathing life into it that's your own, is really important. And I'm losing my second thought. Yes, to talk about the website, for not to go completely against what Brian said, but for my studio in general, your demo reel is all that we look at until we're really interested in somebody. And I guess you could say, to apply that to more broadly, like, you need to reel people in quickly, especially when they're looking through a lot of different either applicants for a design position or an illustrator, whether it's like through your Instagram or your website. You just have to make it easy, really easy, to get a sense of who you are as an artist. What art can you do? What are you really skilled at? Make it so easy. Like, they can't miss your best pieces. Because it happens where it's like, we almost didn't hire somebody because, we're seeing these pieces of their work, but they're, it kind of left us with questions like, yeah, this piece of animation is nice, but it's not very finished. And we clicked on their website and nothing really looked, finished. It couldn't, we were questioning ourselves like, oh, if we brought this person in, could they do what we need them to do? Little did we know, a few clicks in, they had this wide breadth of design and finished stuff that wasn't, on this front page. So, yes. So it might not be something you're thinking about as you're collecting your work, but that quick, like, snap presentation of, and you can tailor it for, different applications, different jobs, different, roles you want to fill, but making sure that the thing you're applying to or the thing you're looking to do, when you're presenting your work or your portfolio to the person or people who might give you that job or, hire you for that thing, make it as easy as possible. I can't repeat that enough, because when, like, at my studio and I helped go through the internship applications, thankfully I only did like the last 20 of 300, at least for, if you're, this isn't the case with a lot of other disciplines, but with animation or just art production houses that are high in demand, we don't have time to go through all these different, as much as we'd love to. And it's so interesting to see, all these multidisciplined people, but if you're applying for a specific role, definitely tailor your work, from discipline to discipline, project to project. Yes. I think I had one more thing to say, but I've lost it, so maybe I'll remember.
We can loop it back in when it comes up, for sure. So thinking about, how do you both stay, Ty, you're working with one organization, Brian, in your role, you're working with several different partners, right? And different companies, different agencies. This is two-part. What would be, how do you stay on top of industry trends? And within your area, for Ty, your competitors, so kind of keeping a pulse on what's going on, so you're not just in a bubble with one set of agencies, or Ty with your organization. And then maybe if there's professional associations, diversity initiatives, affinity groups, that would be good prep for students to engage with.
Where do you want to go first?
I can try to go first. Though I personally, at my job, don't deal with much competition with other studios that do ads. But if I were in someone else's shoes in my studio, let's say, we have 20 different directors, and some of them they focus in 2D animation, some are stop motion directors, some do 3D, some do multiple. And when our studio gets, to give a super watered down summary. Say like Honda wants to make a new commercial, and then they'll get in touch with an agency per se, like something like where Brian is, and the agency will get in touch with these different studios, ours, or there are other studios in New York, or other studios wherever, and so there's competition to win a pitch to get that job, and that's on a big studio scale, but it also, I'm sure, happens on an individual scale also when people are looking for space. Brian and I were talking about earlier, like a company might be looking for a specific style, and they need to fan out these different artists, and they got to choose the winner per se. So in that sense, there's competition between where I work at with these other ad agencies, and to win that, it's just, for us, it's like the breadth of work we have, and from director to director, just our studio just tries to push each discipline as far as it can. And this is again speaking solely from my studio and my own experience, but I think our studio wins a lot of pitches by, we have say there's a humorous project that we need winning. We have a director that does a lot of really crude, humorous, like hilarious things, but we also have someone who does really subtle, really eloquent, really can tackle really tough to talk about subject matter really tastefully. So to bring that back to like an individual standpoint, being well-rounded in the sense that you can take on these different sort of projects and be, even if it's just in one medium, being able to apply your work in different areas. Can you make something bombastic and really dynamic and crazy to really grab someone's attention, but can you also take this idea that a client has and not overpower it, but like you might be making something that seems understated but really works well for the project. So I guess the competition standpoint, or competition question, just it's from my perspective, working with all these different studios, I think the thing that helps out the most is being able to do a lot of different things well, which seems a really simple answer, but I think it helps a lot. I think that's what puts us above the rest sometimes, is we have an answer, we have a project to show to the client to prove to them we can do what you're looking for, or to show them something that we've done before that they didn't even know they were looking for. But when they see it, they usually know it. So yeah, I'll end it there.
Just so Rhett, to connect on that, I think you bring up a really good point that I continue to try to reiterate to students is, the networking, the industry research, the building your contacts, seeing what others are doing, like keeping it fresh never should stop. And that's, if you're going to, even if you stay within a finite unit, if it's stop animation or it's product design, whatever your field may be, even if you feel really comfortable kind of in that area or unit, parallel me and career services as far as a broader higher ed professional track goes, it's looking at how you can keep a finger on the pulse of who are the experts, who are the new kids on the block that are promoting new ideas, what's the newest agency, or what company's doing what. I coach students. I think that's a great way to be ready for an interview too, to engage with recruiters, to show that if you're interviewing at Hornet, who is other agencies that do similar work, or what was the last piece that about from Hornet, and connecting there. So yeah, I think looking kind of at where you're at, to not be in your bubble, but to just think about, you've always got to keep a fresh perspective and stay engaged.
Yeah, and to add just one last thing to that, I think it's something Brian mentioned earlier. When I was, in school, junior, senior, fifth year, because I was in the dual degree, I was trying to figure out a way, I guess, to put myself ahead of the competition in terms of, me applying. And I really went out of my way to look at the coolest in my case, animations I was seeing around, what were the most successful, what was like the new fad at the time to put, I mean, that's such a fad is, really buying into the, what's the most money grabbing thing at the time, but it worked. I what I saw was a lot of like dynamic, really the camera is moving all over the place sort of animations. So I spent, made a few projects where that was my goal, to learn this thing. And I think, going out of my way to seek out what was new and hip and, breathing life into commercials where it wasn't there before. When I applied, even though I didn't, go to some of these, more specialized art schools that really dial in on animation, hand-drawn character animation, what have you. I think me taking a second to like see what sort of skills would a studio want that's so unique that not everyone has. I think that helped me as a applicant and intern kind of put myself like a notch above. And I think that was something they told me was like, you have the skills needed for the job, but you also have a unique skill set that, our studio doesn't have at the moment. So yeah, just to add that, knowing what skills are maybe, low supply, high demand is good to know too.
Sure.
Whether that's applicable to everything, I'm not sure, but it was definitely applicable.
Yeah, and I think just looking at a broader perspective of what your skill set is and how you can highlight the different components and just kind of be ready to have those conversations as far as to where you fit. And then I do want to talk about your degree, and that I saw Bridget asked a question about that, so we can loop back to that at the end in the Q&A. But Brian, from a perspective of kind of keeping up with those industry trends and professional associations, maybe you could dive into that.
I think it's so cool that Ty's thinking back to, I was thinking back the same way, like when I was leaving school, like where was my head at? And and so, I give you props, Ty, for really kind of looking out there and trying to figure out what's popping and then trying to learn it. I remember having a bunch of work, and some work would get better responses than others as I was either in class from my classmates or my professors, and then also during my internships and shopping things around and asking creative directors when they had a spare moment, what do you think? But taking that to heart, especially that last bit, you should be doing everything you can to get even informational interviews, leverage LinkedIn, leverage your school connections. There's a great alumni network, right? So leverage that just to get these meetings. But you can't come, you can come half-cocked, but you can't come zero-cocked. You need to have had made the first step and have some of the work ready to show so you can get some feedback. But the best thing you can do is take those notes, apply them, and then return to that person, okay? It may have just been an informational interview, but you're showing a lot more than just your talent and capacity to do the work. You're showing that you can listen. There's a maturity there to say, hey, I'm going to, kind of absorb all of this because I'm still kind of figuring out what's what, and take that to heart. I have an open door policy during these types of sessions. If anybody wants to shoot me an email and set up a time to have a call and go through the work, I can't help but be this walking giant, a mass of anecdotes of what I've seen people look for. And I sometimes forget that I didn't have that. I knew of like a dozen agencies that I was looking at when I was coming out of school, right? Now I could probably rattle off 200, so leverage that network, go back to them. My first real opportunity was at Arnold Worldwide, an agency that I got my internship at, and my creative director there gave me these tests. I asked him, could I just give me a test project? And so I would work on these campaigns, and I'd come back, and then he'd give me notes, and I'd refine it, and then he'd give me another one. And even after my internship, I'd freelance there, and he was still giving me this homework. It was like, so look at Ty. We're not getting paid anything for this. We had people who helped us. People helped us along the way, and you will too as you come up the ladder. And so really take that in and try and make those changes, because I think that ultimately. Oh yeah. So my creative director eventually, like after the 6th campaign, he's like, look, the work's great, but the other half of this is that I can't get rid of you. You know what I mean? Like you just keep coming back, and that hunger, right? That willingness to change and grow is massive. right? So, don't just people, send the thank you email, take those notes, and a nice cadence, 3 weeks, a month down the road, make those changes, hit them back, be like, hey, by the way, I took your notes, I wanted to see what I'm up to, right? And even if they don't give you other notes, keep pushing it and send it again in another month. Hey, I changed this thing, right? You will be top of mind. To Ty's point, 300 reels. How many people are doing that, right, with your studio? How many people are trying to engage in a meaningful way? So, that would be definitely a strong recommendation to make sure you're refining and understanding what has value and how to continue to grow and grow connections.
Yes, I wanted to say, at least for me, it's like a lot of our, I didn't land a lot of my internships the first time. And Brian and I are talking about all these internships we've done and things like that. That's just my focus. I wanted to get the experience. I wanted to taste all these different things so that I was very career minded. And I don't know if Brian is the same. I don't want to speak for him, but like my idea of learning, I guess, more of a trade than an art from my animation standpoint. I really sought out learning through experiencing the studio in the workplace, which is not necessary. I have friends and coworkers who, really spent the time to hone their craft on their own. That's not to, I don't want to, you shouldn't underestimate though the power of networking though, because yes, I think I stopped this thought halfway through, but a lot of the internships I didn't get the first time around, and same for, some of the interns that land at my studio. They get notes or they get rejected, or maybe they even get an interview, but we end up picking someone else. And we are more than happy when to see someone apply again, with so many improvements, and we put them, much higher on our priority list to see someone come back with new work. And to, we had someone who, we knew it was such a competitive, a competitive season of submissions that we knew this applicant wasn't going to get, accepted. There were just so many skilled people, but this was their third time applying, and we set up a video call for them to get feedback from me, another full-time person, and 2 other workers at our studio, just because we're not completely soulless as we're going through these hundreds of applicants, but to see the initiative, even from me, who's only, someone 2 years out of school, I don't think, the older, sorry, Brian, are too jaded of yet of these people who really want the job or really want to improve or want to show their stuff. So I would say, yeah, completely soulless. Yeah, we're getting there. But yeah, no, don't be afraid to show excitement. Don't badger somebody, but I've reached out to people before who, there was an animator in Boston that I just loved his work, and I, cold emailed him. I was like, hey, I love your work. Was not expecting any response, and he got back to me, and I ended up interning at the place he worked at.
Awesome.
And that's just, again, coming from me having such a career, laser focused thought of what I wanted to do, having some foresight or just some planning of being planting seeds. Maybe you're not ready, your work isn't at a certain point, but to plant some seeds, or I want to work here, I want to work with this director, I want to work at this design studio.
I want to chime in on that. I actually I poached, you'd be amazed, everyone on this call, who might respond to you. And again, you don't want to be a grade A stalker or whatever, but there were poster series in comm arts that I just fell in love with. And it's easy enough to figure out this person's at this agency. You'd go on their site. I shot some creative directors some emails, just being like, I really love these series. I just wanted to reach out and, with my appreciation, right? And began a couple of, I still have a bunch of posters that were mailed to me. They paid for the postage and they mailed these posters to me, and we began this conversation. So following those passions, even if somebody's super, going to Michael Beirut at Pentagram, he may not get back to you right away. But if you see somebody that you're really passionate about their work, they may be just as surprised to hear from you. So start those conversations. Following your passion is a very powerful thing.
I also tell students to think about those conversations can happen so many places. One of the units we did in the career class is focusing on an informational interview and, kind of looking at key questions and putting that all together in a visual representation, but not being afraid to stay open-minded that career conversations and links and leads to opportunities can come from, a classmate's partner or, a classmate's friend in another school who is interning and, found an opportunity and that company happens to be hiring. So because of your networking and you're reaching out and thinking broadly, you're able to make connections, or even, a relative that you engage with around the holidays when you're home in normal times and can, maybe they're badgering you about your career and what your future holds. They may have a wealth of network, and if it's not, people in their roles at the organization, it may be maybe their HR person has a daughter or a child who's in the same, same track as you or same career interests, and it can just lead to other conversations. So always feeling ready to, be able to engage. Think about it as engaging versus sort of a sales pitch. I think that'll help you make it feel more genuine. We like both of these guys have said, we're all at that point and have had to do this, and it's a natural part of the process. I think that being said, just to leave time for questions and that, if you just had any quick resources or professional associations. So I often refer students to AIGA, Chicago Interactive Marketing Association. If there, a few quick things like that. And then I'd like to open the floor for questions.
So check out Ad Club Boston. They host the Hatch Awards each year. If you're interested in advertising conceptualization, they're a good organization to be affiliated with, and they hook up a lot of kind of designers too. That's one that comes to mind, at least regionally.
I can't speak for too many organizations, but for animation specifically, there's Animatic Boston is a good Boston local group, and they've actually just recently, and I can type that in the chat in a second, they made like a Slack channel that has job postings, and you can talk to like the head of the biggest studios in Boston. All the members are all on there. The head of animation, a lot of the senior creatives are all on there. So for animation specifically, that's an awesome place to be, and I can get a link to that Slack thing too. But there is an Animatic Boston Facebook group that has links to there, and they do events and speakers online. They used to do it in person, and that was an awesome way to meet local animators. They haven't done it recently, but yeah, look out for more remote speakers there. It's a really awesome group.
I have a link I'm going to try to include before the end of the chat. We've got Creative Circle put together a page for a thing we did for Hatch Awards last month, and it was just so good with so many resources. So I'll dump that into, just ignore the fact
great.
For Hatch Awards.
That's great. All right, so let's go ahead and just dive into questions from the group. One thing I just want to highlight before I forget is another resource from the perspective of diversity, equity, inclusion, especially as the conversations we've had here tie into advertising, marketing, in that world. The 4A, so the American Association of Advertising Agencies, has a program called the Multicultural Advertising Internship Program. There's an info session tomorrow evening from 6 to 7. The event is in Handshake, and you're absolutely all welcome to attend. The uniqueness of this program is that it is geared towards students who identify from diverse populations. You are recruited and then given a lot of opportunity to engage with a cohort of professionals like yourself, paid summer internship, an awesome career network, as well as career fair too, I believe, is something that they do. So that info session is tomorrow night from 6 to 7, and you can find that in Handshake. So I would recommend anyone interested definitely attend. And please check out all of the other Arts Week events. We have a few slots left with Brian Hone at the Gardner for the Smash the Imposter Syndrome. We have a couple other slots with Kelly Heath from Gupta Media. And then we also have the ACAD Career Fair. If you are having issues signing up for that, there are still about 30 employers still building their schedule. So just hold tight and keep checking, make sure that you've registered properly for that career fair. And any questions at all with that Arts Week, just let me know. All right, so diving in, we have a question from Jasmine. And I don't know, there was a question about Ty's degree, and it was other degree, and it was art history is what you finished with, right, Ty? Okay,
Yes.
Just want to make sure I covered that one for everybody. They did add their emails for you. There's a Creative Circle resource list. So Jasmine's question is regarding technical skill. Should we first develop our technical skill to a professional level before we look for internships? So how do you, can you talk about the barometer there? And you offered some really good insight and ways to kind of sort of get those test projects and that, and obviously students can engage with faculty and staff here. We do portfolio review days from time to time. And then kind of, beyond that community, I think any way they can brush up on that would be key. So what level should you start presenting your portfolio, kind of how to check the barometer on where you're at technical skill wise? How professional and polished does it have to look like? Maybe you can offer some examples of like key things to hit, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, was that to Ty? I'm so sorry.
No, Brian,
go ahead.
Oh, cool. So, a lot of this comes down to timing too, I find. If you happen to be on a trust fund and can ride for a couple years after you graduate and just continue to push the work so hard, but most normal people, once they graduate, they've got to find some work. So I think what you try to do is find that balance. And the best thing you can do is wherever you're at in your training now is start to do that outreach as much as you can. But yeah, to your point, Ryan, at least getting that litmus test within the safe confines of the university, say, oh, what are my better pieces? And trying to lead with those as best you can, trying to understand why those are your best pieces. And also trying to, continue to push the work. Bad news, good news, once you graduate, you still should be pushing along the work, continue to grow that as best you can. But all you can do is what you can do. Right. So I think that if you're like, oh, I'm not at that level yet, I think, Ryan, you cited in How to Beat the Imposter Syndrome, you'll always kind of feel that way. And you'll always kind of hate your work a little bit because you're growing as an artist. And I think it's called the divine dissatisfaction. The thing that drives you to do better work is the fact that once you create it, maybe you want to do even better. Right. And that's a great thing to have. So, I mean, don't overthink it. Work hard. Learn as much as you can, and really try and, have a diverse set of influences, a diverse set of opinions, and then just go for it, right? Your work is your work, and continue to take that feedback. If you don't get the job, at least maybe you get some good notes so you can continue to push the work along.
And then to answer this question with like animation in mind, should you develop your technical skill to a professional level before you look for an internship? A lot of internships are meant for learning. They're more than happy to, it's not, it's not going to be this crazy learning curve for you to get into their pipeline or, their production method or whatever art form you're doing. But for animation, program wise, like, if they can see you're talented and you have the skills that can translate into their work, they're usually more than happy to teach you what you need to know on the job. At least in my experience, 2 internships I had, they started me out, with something of a test, and it would kind of gauge where I was. And if I wasn't there, they would show me the way up. But they don't hold your hand. They kind of expect you to, run with it. So Yeah, to echo Brian a bit, you might not have the luxury of waiting until you think you're at a professional level. But yeah, I would just say go for it, and don't expect every employer to cast you aside just because you're not the best you could possibly be. I think you'd be surprised.
And there's the work to get the internship, but then there's the internship itself. And to Ty's point, I mean, the best advice I can give is be humble. Be humble. You know what I mean? Take the feedback, because sometimes there's this inverse correlation with people who have outstanding work. They can be hard to work with. They think, you know what I mean? So there's a reputation for some juniors to kind of think they know what's up. If you do have a vision, pursue it. But I think a good policy is often try and adhere to the notes as best you can to produce the thing that's being asked for. And then if you want to go ahead and deliver something that's more along the lines of what your vision was, that's extra. At least you did your homework, and now then you're going above and beyond. But just try to make sure that you're showing up and really listening and learning. Right? I had one shot I remember with the creative director where I was not, and he basically didn't want to work with me again. so be careful.
So there's some really good two portfolio questions that tie in, and then I want to loop back to this kind of mentorship and like how you transition from an intern on. So Janet asked, do you have any advice for building portfolio, especially if you have more of a, say, fine art, studio art background, but the listing is more design based?
I think that it can be, you really have to show how that fine art can be applied to a graphic design discipline at the end of the day. But the good news is you may not be so far off. The real question is, do you want to do the graphic design because it's in great numbers and you can subsist on it? Or are you doing it because it's something that you are really interested in? And I think that's just a question you have to ask yourself because there's going to be some work involved. I see sometimes even graphic designers will feature album cover work first and foremost. And, it's just so close to pure art. There's rarely much communication being kind of amplified through these projects. It's not a heavy graphic design lift. It's a beautiful thing. And that's great. I mean, it's nice work if you can get it, but most graphic design requires you to somehow, it's communication arts. So, maybe you can take that as a jumping off point, say, how can I use this thing and then kind of leverage it for business purposes? But more often than not, it's probably going to be kind of starting anew and saying, hey, that's a great foundation to jump off from, but now I'm going to try and say, okay, well, can I create an identity system and then activate it across your typical communication channels, be they print, digital, broadcast, video, social media? That's the best advice I can give if you're trying to transition.
Awesome. If we are interested in storyboarding, should we include equal amounts storyboards and full animation in our portfolios, or mostly one of those?
I can answer that. I don't do much storyboarding myself, and I don't review the storyboard portfolios that we look at. But if you're applying for something that's storyboarding, you should show your storyboards first and foremost. I don't think if you're looking to be hired as a storyboard artist, they're not going to care if you can animate because you won't be animating for them. It's nice. I mean, what Brian was saying, it's the communication with storyboard. It's all about how clear and how concise you can be, and the ideas that you can get through, with as little, as few lines. Just the clarity is the most important. And I would honestly say if you try to animate your boards, if they don't match up to how clear your storyboards are, I think it could actually, take away from your portfolio if this finished animation, isn't as clear as what maybe you presented in your boards. So that would be my advice for storyboarding specifically. That being said, when we have interns apply for 2D animation internship, it's nice to see that they can do storyboards. It's nice to see they have a portfolio of storyboarding, because at my studio, at least when you're working in the studio, not as a freelancer, but as, and house person. You wear a lot of different hats, but I would say for like a freelance position, you just want to show what you're applying for, and try not to muddy that portfolio with other things if you can help it. Yeah.
I want to ride your coattails on that a little bit and speak about process and showing process, because I'm not going to contradict what you just said, Ty. I just want to sort of add on to it that I think that social media has really inculcated us all into the long scroll. People are not unaccustomed to doing this ad infinitum, right? So I think that there's room to have sections in your portfolio, and to Ty's point, to really feature your best work or the most indicative work of what you're trying to do or what they're looking for first. But when you get into that section showing the finished pieces and then having a very clear delineation and saying, now I'm going to show you how I got to this, I'm pretty convinced that nobody really is reading anything on portfolios. They tend to flip through them like a magazine. So if you're able to show, for instance, I just met with somebody who used to work for Disney, and a lot of it I would have assumed was straight production work because she's so constrained by style guides. However, there were opportunities for her to really riff on some of these kind of branding things. And it's only because she showed a process down below. Here's some of my sketches. Here's my color explorations. I'm like, sweet, I didn't even realize that. I thought you were production, but you're really showing some cool like art direction chops here, right? So, I would definitely recommend, there's kind of a cool place for it. And remember, you're advertising to advertisers in a way. You're sort of, you're trying to get a job for people who love what it is that you both do. So you can kind of geek out a little bit, kind of show your study on typography, if it's whatever. So, just not leading with that. A lot of people want to begin at a story. This is where I started. This is how bad the old logo was. Don't do that. Show the finished work, and then you can show the process at the end. And I think it helps to tell a compelling story.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome. So moving forward, we have, where did it go? Sorry. Is the best way to send a folio as a file catered to the studio website that works for all, but as such can be catered to a specific application. So having a web presence and then a portfolio, like kind of what would be the best option? I mean, I think it's always going to be best to cater, to highlight your various skill sets, right? But if it doesn't feel like it's representative of the work or what the agency might be interested in, that's something to consider before you send, right?
You can reorder your portfolio site, and that's probably the best way to do it. Breakdown real quick, I would say if it's tactical, if what you do is tactical, right? You create beautiful things. You're a designer, you're an animator. I think that the website tends to be the thing. But I think that if you're trying to tell a story of strategy, then you could consider putting together a PDF where you're able to better tell these micro case studies page by page. Here's, not sure it resulted in this end deliverable. And maybe this isn't for this audience today because we may all be tactical, but those who are also working on strategy and kind of saying, this is where we began, this is what we assumed, this is where we ended up, here are results. Then, all of a sudden the end deliverable becomes kind of like the byline saying, like, hey, this is, if you want to click here and check out the work, that's great, but I'm trying to tell this bigger story. I like PDFs for that because you can shuffle the deck depending upon what anecdotes you're trying to feature. And I think that's becoming more typical for places that are looking for, say, content for social media, because it's not just the animated GIF, it's sort of what was it meant to do. Maybe that's off track based on the question, but I think the expectation is that you're talking about a web portfolio and you should just mix it up depending upon what you're excited about applying for.
Alexis.
Yeah, I realize we're going over a bit, so I'll make this fast. This one's for Brian. I was just curious as to how you made the decision from your undergrad to your graduate degree, and kind of that career shift, or as it seems to me, a career shift.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started doing websites because people needed websites. This is like old school, right? It's like I worked for a company and they knew that I did design. And so they commissioned me to do it. And then I picked up other clients. But part of that was development, front end development. And I'm okay at math too, but I don't like doing math on the regular. So, there was a period of time where I was able to really kind of carve out a niche doing this. But it's become less frustrating. Front end development and interactive design, it used to be horrible. And I think I was going to have an aneurysm. So the thing I really enjoyed was sort of this strategic messaging. I loved advertising thinking. It's like crafting a joke. So there's just a lot there that I really enjoyed, the strategic bent. So I went back for my master's so I could kind of more formally make a pivot out of that. But rest assured, people were still trying to call me about the stuff that they needed, right? It's a great example of how do you contextualize. So I removed any mention of front-end development in any of my materials on LinkedIn or, on my resume. That just wasn't an offering anymore, even though I could do it. So your resume can certainly account for all the stuff you've done, but you're allowed to obfuscate to some degree or to curate the things that you want to showcase, the things that they're looking for.
Awesome. And just to be conscientious of time, there was a question about, kind of how did you transition from intern to full-time employee? And I feel like, a lot of that was covered, but maybe we could just end tonight with kind of like 2 or 3 quick tips, like what you would tell your college self to make the most of that first internship and how to like translate it to, to be a rock star and translate that into full-time employment.
Okay, 1 second as I'm forming my tips.
I figured I'd let you go first, Ty, since it's probably fresher.
It is fresher. It should be fresher. It depends on where you go. I know one of my first internships was here in New York City, and the people I was surrounded by made the internship. I actually didn't learn much with the work I was doing at that particular internship, but I did learn what the lay of the land by the people I was working with and talking to all these people and seeing what they were doing and what studios they were hopping around to. So one tip would be just, get to know the people you're working with, because they'll have a lot to teach you, even if they don't even realize they're teaching you. Just you'll learn so much just by talking to them. Where have they worked? What have they done? Or, especially, New York City is a special case for sure. There's just so much going around, so many moving pieces and so many places to go. But yeah, that would be my first tip. I guess to take the second tip to maybe a more, a place, not so dense with, potential, coworkers or, friends in your same medium. I would say, Brian made a good point earlier, just be there to learn and take advice as you go, and, don't go in thinking because you got this internship, you're the top applicant, that, you already know everything you need to know. Because in the end, you're going to be going into their pipeline. So it's not all about just, once you get there, showing your stuff, showing your talent, even though there is totally a place for that. And a lot of good internships will give you the time and place to like, all right, here's your chance to make something of your own, knock it out of the park. But a lot of times, if it's you're interning at a place that you'd be interested in staying at or, freelancing for in the future, being kind, being nice to work with, getting to know the people there, but also just showing you can be like a valuable part of their team of like, and help them get these things to the door, smoothly and without too much fuss. Yeah. I might have one more, but I'll leave it to Brian.
I'm going to piggyback on your first one a little bit, because in Boston, that's where all my internships were. It's even more true. Getting to know the people that you're interning with, they'll show up through your entire career, right? It's they keep, or you knew them and then they know somebody else. You know what I mean? There's just, it's really so, and now I can see the entire web now that I've been doing this for a little while. So, again, be kind, don't burn bridges. You don't know where these folks are going to show up again. Work hard is my other bit of advice, and not just for school, but for your internship, right? Even if it is a 20-hour-a-week internship, if you can manage to go in an extra day, go in an extra day, right? Because I'll see some people who have internships that are, I did during the fall is 5 hours a week or something, and they really didn't get too much out of it. So, once you have the opportunity, really seize upon it, and then while we're saying all of this, because I'm sure we're all tightening up as we hear all this, like, I gotta, have fun, right? This is an awesome discipline that you're entering into with awesome people and awesome work. So, enjoy yourself, work hard, have fun, make friends, be passionate, all the stuff that we probably learned in kindergarten and forgot some time ago. That's probably the best advice I could give.
Great. Well, round of applause to our awesome panelists tonight, Brian and Ty. Thanks so much for making time and your awesome advice that you shared with students. I will save the chat and all of that. And again, this is recorded, so it will be on our YouTube playlist. It's just Tufts Career Services on the YouTube playlist. And you can access that through our website, careers.tufts.edu. And don't forget to RSVP for events for Career Week. Still plenty of room to participate. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.